So I want to thank everyone for watching, for coming to the last of the main online conference. There will be no more YouTube videos, no more Zooms for the remainder of the summer. We are lucky. We're lucky to have Chris from UMaine. He's an assistant coach, focuses primarily in sprints and jumps. We've talked earlier, and I'm really excited about what he has in store for us today. I know I'm going to learn a lot. I hope you do too. So, Chris, I'm going to kick it over to you. And
awesome.
There we go.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Let's see. There we go. Share. Beautiful. Dun, dun, dun. Let me just get this set up. Oh boy. Sorry about that. So yeah, thank you for the introduction. Like you said, I'm Chris Flynn, assistant coach at UMaine, focusing on jumps, sprints, and multis. So believe it or not, I'll be going into my 14th year coaching at the collegiate level. It's crazy how fast it's gone by. But I'm more excited every year to do it. Happy to do things like this where I can try to share some of the things I've learned. Luckily, I'm learning every day, every year. And hopefully, if I do this presentation in another 14 years, it'll be completely different and I've evolved another level. But when I was asked to do this, I wanted to take a slightly different approach. So I think there's so many coaches out there doing an amazing job, like we saw in the presentations through this avenue we've already seen, doing the technical aspect and teaching sprints and jumps and doing a great job. So I'm definitely going to touch on the sprints for sure, little observations and little drills and things. I really want to go over how we build a program, how we put the pieces together. I think it's so important as coaches that we can establish a strong foundation before we just start adding pieces left and right. So I'm going to obviously cater to sprinting, but I want it to be like how we build the program. And a lot of this we can take to whether you're coaching jumps or hurdles or multis or whatever you're coaching. You can take some of these and apply it, these principles, to that avenue of coaching. So to start with, whenever you go to anything with coaches, you always go over your philosophy. And mine is very, very simple philosophy. It's something I always start the year with every group I coach. We go over this. It's something I reiterate almost on a weekly basis. I believe in the how over the what. You always have to have the why. Meaning how we do something is always going to be more important than what we do. And there always has to be an appropriate why. So for example, I could go through my contacts and I could get the greatest training program ever created, the best. When I get it in my hands, it could be glowing. It's so good, right? But if I just randomly hand it to an athlete and don't really coach it very well, they don't know what they're doing, the result is going to be garbage. Nonsense. We're not going to get anything out of it. But in the same token, I could take a very simple, basic program I write on a piece of paper. And if I do my job well, and the athletes understand what we're doing, we know why we're doing it, we know how we're going to do it, we're going to get better results that way every day of the week. Now, if you want to have a really, really good program, you can combine the two, right? You can take a really, really good program, and then you can make sure it is executed well. And that is how you're really, really going to get success. So I talk about all the time. The how is more important. I mean, what is important to an extent. We don't want to be doing something completely crazy, but the actual drills and the things we do are not ever as important as how we're going to do them. And then the why. It always has to fit in our plan. And then one of the big things when we're developing a program is the environment. The environment is critical. So we really want to create a place where people want to be. They want to be involved in their sport. They want to be involved in their team. They want to be at practice. That's what we should strive for. So my goal is to have my athletes, when they're sitting in class during the day, I want them looking forward to coming to practice that afternoon. I want them to really be excited. Even if it's a tough workout and they're a little hesitant, I want it to be a place they want to be, with people they like being around, in a structure they enjoy. That's what we want. And we want people that are invested in the program. It shouldn't just be a thing they do. They want to be there. They want to be excelling. That's what we want. And I included the little my sport is your sport's punishment, because that, I think we're seeing less and less of that. But that, that philosophy is still present a little bit. We're tough because we run all the time. I don't believe in that one bit. I don't think our sport is your sport's punishment. Our sport is a great sport. It's an enjoyable sport. It's one you can have a lot of fun in, just like football or basketball or baseball or soccer or any other great sport. We shouldn't be separating ourselves as some weird punishment they get sent to. It should be a place people want to be. One of the things I get asked the most from recruits is, what do you need to do to be on the team? What do you look for? And then being Division I, we're obviously looking for talent, right? There's a certain level of talent you need to have. But one of the biggest things I look for as a coach is I want people that have a passion for the sport, a true love and passion for the sport. Because once you get to college, specifically Division I, you're looking at a 9-month season, 6 days a week. Like, it's a big investment. And if it's someone that may be really talented, but they don't really enjoy it, they just kind of do it, more often than not, you're going to see them not succeeding in the end. But if you got someone that absolutely loves the sport, they love coming to your practices, they love being a part of the team, that's someone that has a real opportunity to be able to develop. And I think we can create this as coaches. We don't have to be a sport where we're just running back and forth and being tired and having low quality of work and yelling at people. It should be a place that people want to be. I think that's massive for us. Great athletes, specifically high school athletes, that are passionate about this sport. And then to me, structure is incredibly important. How we go about putting a training plan together is critical to the success. Obviously, it's going to help us stay organized, but it's also going to show people you care. Which is one of the most important aspects you can convey as a coach, showing people you care. And if we can go ahead of time and really plan ahead and know what we're going to do, the results are going to be that much better. The how is going to be that much better. Again, the structure and how we do it is just so important. Now, some of the things I'm going to go over next, if you've taken USATF Level 1, or if you've gone to a USTF CCCA certification course, there'll be a little bit of redundancy there. But hopefully we can create a little bit of spin on it, add a little bit of my insights that I've learned, and to show why it's not something we should gloss over. It's something that we should really kind of take serious. So we got macrocycle. Macrocycle, that's just a fancy word for planning ahead. So this is a quasi unfinished, but this was the macrocycle I was going off of for our illustrious 2020 outdoor season, which, rest in peace, never happened. When I'm creating a macrocycle, all I'm trying to do is get a big picture idea of what I'm trying to do. And for me, what I might do with this is, after I have kind of dates blocked off, I've broken it up into mesocycles that we'll get into. I plan out kind of where the meets are. I know where we want to be really on top of things. We want to be really crisp, or where we can really kind of load the athletes. And this is going to really tell me where I can put things going forward, so that when the season gets here, I'm not just randomly going through things. Like, I know what I'm trying to do. Um, again, confidence with the athletes is huge. If they know you've got things planned ahead, they know you're on a structure that's going to be massive for them buying into the program. Um, so yeah, obviously this didn't happen, but we had it planned right basically when we ended indoor, right up until hopefully we were going to the NCAAs. And then this just lets me plan out where we need to be. And like I said, a mesocycle, again, fancy word for training phase. For us, we typically have 3 to 5 week mesocycles. Now you can see on our macrocycle, meso 3 is very weird. It's only 2 weeks. It's very, very short. But when I was planning it ahead, I knew that once we got past meso 2, or our second outdoor training cycle, we're basically, by the end of that one, we're into our big meets. And I knew that by the end of meso 3, most were going to be done, with only a couple going. So what I treated it as almost like a somewhat continuation of meso 2. Made sure I gave enough breaks to go to conference and be ready, but not enough that, but made sure it was still fresh enough that they're ready for the next meets. I think having a common theme. So again, this is a training phase. It shouldn't be a just random series of workouts and drills and days. It should all be kind of cohesive. So for example, if I'm designing a training phase at the beginning of the year, my mesocycle theme might be just introducing the training to the athletes, because I know I'm going to have a lot of new athletes coming in that need to learn how we do things. I know I'm going to have returning athletes that haven't maybe done much for a couple months. Hopefully they have, but sometimes they haven't. So I want to take that time, that whole first mesocycle is going to be just teaching them how we do things. What drills are we going to do? What workouts are we typically going to do? How's it going to be run? How are we going to transition from warm up to the workout to cool down? All of those things. That's going to be the theme of that. And then I want to make sure I'm allowing for progressions within it. So, for example, if we're just getting going and we're going to be working on acceleration, I want to have different acceleration progressions built in there. So the athlete can see as they're going along through the mesocycle, through the training phase, that they're progressing. They're doing slightly different things. They're getting better. That's a big, big part of it. And then another huge thing for me is I always make sure I end the training cycle with a deload, restoration week, whatever you want to call it. Because let's say it's a 5-week mesocycle, for 4 weeks, we've been training really, really hard. If we keep it going into week 5, they're going to be just spent by the time we start up our next one. So in that 5th week, we're going to make sure we are still doing similar things that we have been doing, but less of it. So what I do in that deload period is I bring the volume way down, and but the intensity stays at a fairly constant level. Because really, again, in this, it's so important we do this so they're ready to go. Because if you just keep stacking training cycle on top of training cycle and you're not providing appropriate recovery, they're just gonna get burnt out real quick, and it's not gonna go well. So, testing. Saw some of the presenters talk about testing, some of the other presentations. Huge fan. And when I'm designing a mesocycle, I'm trying to plan out where I'm going to test the athletes. So when we test here at Maine, we have 5 tests we do. It's a very standard test. You'll see it done in programs across the country. We do a 30-meter sprint, timed with free lap, which we'll get into. We do a standing broad jump. We do a standing triple jump. We take a shot put, throwing overhead backwards. We take a shot put, throw it between the legs forward. Men use the standard men's weight for shot put. Women use standard women's weight for shot put. And then all of these tests are basically looking at power output. When we do it, they all get 3 attempts each. And then we actually score it all out and present it to the athletes. Like I say here, I try to do 3 to 4 times a year. Doesn't always work out. But that's what I try to do. Um, I have found so many benefits to testing. For one, we're obviously, as it implies, we're seeing where they're at from a power output standpoint. We're seeing how the training is affecting them. Like I always tell the athletes when we're going to test, it's just as much a test on me as it is on you. Because if I get results back and I see 90% of the athletes got worse, degressed, then I'm doing something wrong. We need to change things up. Another big part is it allows them to compete. Especially, it's a little different for us, but we might have a period where we're training for 2 to 3 months, no competition. So this lets them compete in a very simple manner. Um, and the feedback I've seen from testing is just unbelievable. Just a couple weeks ago, I was talking to an athlete on the team, and they unprovoked brought up testing and about how themselves and another athlete in the team were kind of bickering back and forth in a fun manner, talking about how they can't wait to beat them at testing next year. Like it's something athletes have grown to look forward to. They're excited. They want to win. They want to improve. It's just again building a positive training environment. This is a great tool in the quiver. Great tool in the quiver. And what I included here was just one of our testing rounds. I took the names out. But basically, you can see all the results. We're being college, we do everything in meters, and then the score they had. And if you look off to the right, this is the column I really, really like. As you can see, the vast majority were in the green. They improved. Their score improved. This is what we like to see. We can see a few different regressions here. And if we see that, we go through and see, okay, was that athlete injured? Did they miss training? Am I not training them correctly? Are they overtrained at this point? It's going to help us cue into what we can do to help the athletes. You can see some are improving by massive amounts and some by just marginal. It's often common to see the athletes at the top only improving marginally because they're already, elite athletes. And then, so this chart here is something I'd provide to the athletes so they can see. And they love getting this, because they can see exactly where they stand on the team, how they did compared to last testing. Again, it's great for creating, I think, a positive competitive aspect to the team. Microcycle. So now we're getting into the fun things. So all microcycle is, it's just a fancy word for a training week. And then, so this is after we've done the macro and the meso, we've done all the big picture. To me, this is, this is our final exam as coaches, final written exam. This is what is going to be presented to the athlete. When we're trying, and what I've noticed is having a well-planned week of training is massive for the confidence of the athletes. When they see you got a plan, when they see you put time into this week and you're not just showing up to the track and coming up with stuff, they're going to, again, they know you care, and they're going to be much more invested in your program. I guarantee it. So when we're doing this, some of the things I'm always looking for is I'm looking at the intensity, the volume, where I'm spacing the days. High CNS days, if we're doing max, sprinting or speed endurance or any high intensity activity, I need to make sure we're allowing for proper recovery for that. And then another thing I see is sometimes competitions being almost a separate category. When we're planning a week of training, we absolutely need to include competitions in that training. The body has no idea that they're competing versus training. The body is exerting a massive amount of effort. Volume could be moderate to low, but it's still a very intense day of competition/training. And we need to treat it as such. And the last thing I have here is then, like I said, we talk about a theme. Each day should have a theme. So if I'm coming into a Monday and the theme is acceleration, that's what that day consists of. From the warm-up to how we're describing the training, to the actual training itself, everything is be focused on acceleration or whatever else happens to be in that day. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy. Fun is a perfectly acceptable theme of training. I have prescribed that before. One of my days of training in the past has been a team breakfast. That was our training for the day. They were fatigued from a lot of training. You could see them getting a little burnt out. So our Saturday morning practice was breakfast. So again, it doesn't always have to be, oh, we're going to be fast and strong. That's our theme. No, it has to fit in with your plan. If it fits into the plan, you're fine. And then now we need to put the week of training together. So when I'm looking at themes or training components, these are kind of 4 things I'm looking at when I'm building my program. And again, it can be different for everybody. Just because this is what I use doesn't mean it's what you have to use. I like 4, you might have 8, or some might have 3, some might have 17, whatever works for you. So for me, I divide it into our speed work. This is our maximal effort work. For us sprinters, this is as important as it gets for us. And then I have our tempo, that's just any of our submax running, our specific speed, which you can really just see as a combination of speed work and a tempo, and then our restoration or our deload work, which comes into play every single week to some extent. And then as I'm building the training, I'm seeing where I want to space these, what I want them to consist of, how I'm going to coach it. So I always make sure I have these kind of components in mind when I'm creating the week of training. And this gibberish is a week of training for us. And again, like I said, it does not have to look anything like this. Whatever works for you is what you need to do. I've learned over the years, this is what a training week looks like for me. And all that really matters at the end of the day is that you can read it and understand it. And whatever athlete you have on the team that like looking at it can read it and understand it. Because I find there's kids on the team that don't really care about what your training plan looks like. They just want to know what it is and they want to do it. That's great. But then you have kids, you show up and they want to see this plan. They want to see what they're doing. They want to know what their week looks like. So just making sure you can understand it and those particular athletes can understand it is what really matters. And earlier on in my coaching career, if I was coaching jumpers and sprinters and multis, I would come in with like 3 or 4 different versions of this. One for sprints, one for jumps, one for multis, like maybe one for high jump and one for long jump. And over the years, especially as I'm coaching more athletes, as I'm working, I could be working with up to 40 athletes, a day at this point. I just cram it all in one. Again, as long as I can read it, we're good. So you can see in this one, I have the jumpers and the sprinters all in one, and I just happen to have multis in a different one. But typically they're doing something similar to this, a combination of, so I can just usually refer to this sheet. Again, I've talked about the what isn't as important. So like the what's on here isn't terribly important, but we can go over it really, really quick. So this piece of training came from this past season. This is, you can see phase 3, and this is the first week in that phase. So this is about as crazy as a phase of training gets for us. We had no meet that week. We were about a month and a half or so from our big competitions. So this is when we're really putting in work. So for us, Monday is always a speed day. This is an acceleration themed day. And what I was trying to do here is, it's the start of a training phase. One of the big themes we're going to be going over in this particular phase is resisted sprinting. And what I found, it's not very helpful to just grab a sled and throw weight on it. It's not going to be very effective. So what we did is we set up timing gates. And we would time the athlete through, I believe it was 15 meters with no weight, no resistance. And then we had different series of weights we'd put on, and then they would get 2 attempts at each weight. So we would time everything out. We would just try to get a percentage of the athlete. Um, so that when we did future resisted runs, they knew exactly what weight that they had to use for each individual athlete. Made it very easy. And then we stuck with the acceleration theme. So we went into some block starts, which we'll definitely get into block starts later. And then the jumpers, they had already done a lot of excel work, so I actually put in some max velocity work for them. So 10-meter fly. So basically they had 25 meters to work with, ish, and they had to be as fast as they could for 10 meters. So I say 25 meters-ish because our athletes, when we're doing a fly, they can start from 20 meters, 25, 30. As long as they're at top speed for that 10-meter segment, that's all we need. And then in this particular case, we ended with some plyo, some bounding. So this was a pretty big, decent speed day. It wasn't overly taxed with volume, but a decent speed acceleration day. And now what I came back with on Tuesday was something a little different for us. So this would typically be a true medium intensity day, but it's really a high intensity day. And it is very rare for us that we will schedule back-to-back high intensity training days. Very rare. Happens a couple times a year max. The reason I do it a couple times a year is, or a few times a year, I should say, is we've got, for us in our conference meet, it's a 2-day event, 2 days. So the sprinters are going to have qualifiers on day 1, they're going to have finals day 2. So I need to make sure that by the time they get there, they have done some high intensity work back to back. So I do try to include that. And this being week 1 of a training cycle, being a month and a half out from bigger meets, this is a perfect opportunity to put that in. And this is a speed endurance work, which is a brutal one. We included a specific warm-up. Because one thing I find, whenever we're doing high intensity activity, you've got to make sure they're warmed up properly. So we're getting some good progressive acceleration in. And then what we had them do was they would do a 150 fast, it had to be 90% plus. They would get a minute recovery, so they would walk over to a wicket run, which we'll get into later, which is a max velocity run. And then they would get 8 minutes between each. So lots of recovery. They needed 10, we would give them 10. And we had 4 sets scheduled. If I remember correctly, I think we only had maybe 1 or 2 athletes get through all 4. Once we see times and technique suffering, we call it. So most of the athletes that day did 3, I believe. So it was our speed endurance day. Recovery day is so important. I typically like to structure them on like a circuit, like we have here. And this is I really just try to identify what's tight, what's sore, what do we need to work on in that particular day. So you can see I have a lot of upper body movements in this. So we're seeing some, scaps, traps, little sore tight. So we include a lot of upper body movements here. We had a little bit of, hip movement in here. So we just tried to hit all the areas. We'll get into recovery days later on, but it's not something that should be overlooked. This is one of our most important days. We came back Thursday with another speed day. This time it was in max velocity with some acceleration mixed in. So you can see we took the data from Monday and we put in some specific sled pulls. And then we ended with the sprinters did 20-meter fly, whereas, the jumpers did 10-meter fly, on Monday. Oh boy, there we go. And then Friday, this is another quasi deload day. Like I said, they're super important. I don't want to keep going back to back to back. So this had some stability components built in. It had some technical components built in. We're just trying to make sure we have good technique and we're getting prepared for their last training day of the week. Which here we ended with a sub-max or a tempo day. This is one of the favorite ones I like to use. We hit them with a 5 to 6 by 200 meters. Again, it's how they're doing it is going to determine how many they do. One of the things I believe very firmly in is you earn reps. Our athletes are never punished with reps. If you are doing really well, your work is going great, then we add more reps. If it's not going great, we cut the workout, we cut reps out. I hate the notion that you're doing poorly, so you got to do more. No, that's completely backwards from what we're trying to do. Completely backwards. We want to make sure that quality of work is high at all times. So the way we do this one is we take about what we want from the second half of their 400 meter, and then we do that repeat. This one we did 4-minute recovery. So what it ends up being, probably about 85% intensity, somewhere around there, 85 to 90. So it's not all out sprinting, but it's a pretty good workout. Now, typically for me, this style of workout would normally go Tuesday. Like I said, I wanted to go back-to-back high-intensity workouts, so that got this one bumped in to Saturday. So again, this is what my train looks like. It's a little chaotic, but I'm able to read it. It works for me. And the big thing is I'm able to go into each training day and week knowing exactly what I need to do. And one of the arguments I've heard from people as to why they don't want to produce something like this is that, oh, things always change. You never know what's going to happen, which is true. But I would rather have a plan so that if I do want to change something, I know what I was trying to do. I knew how I was going to do it. And now I can cater accordingly. I'm not just throwing things out there. So by having it planned out ahead of time, I can easily go back and I can make changes as I need to. So it's very rare I get this training program and it happens exactly like this. I'm constantly adjusting things as I go, changing volume, maybe changing some intensities here and there, throwing in slightly different drills, whatever I need to do, to get the highest quality of work possible. It's not an actual ad, but I can't properly go over this without mentioning FreeLap. Last year was the first year we as a team used FreeLap, and I'll never go back. And now we happen to use FreeLap, I should say any timing system. It's not the cheapest thing in the world, but I can't even begin to describe how much this has changed our program. They're so easy to use. You can set up whatever you're doing, block starts or 30s or 40s or flies, 150s, 200s, whatever you're doing, you can easily time this. And what it does, it's going to provide instant feedback to the athlete because it gets sent right to your phone, right to your iPad, whatever you have. So I can see how they're doing in real time. If their work is regressing, you know when that's going to happen. And when we talk about culture, when it comes to sprint work, nothing has improved the quality of sprint work more than this. Because yes, you can do it hand time to an extent, but there's always going to be discrepancy. When you show an athlete a electronic timed run, they know exactly what they did. They're hungry to try to beat it the next time. They want to compete with other people on the team. It's been huge for the environment in our team, creating that culture we want. And it's also been really big for me when it comes to recovery. We keep talking about recovery, and it's just so important. Like I said, we're always doing speed work. On Mondays, pretty much throughout the year, we're doing speed work. And 30 meters is something you see in a lot of my Monday training. A lot of times doing some variant of a 30 meter. So we really know what our times are because we've been timing with FreeLap all year. And one of the things I noticed is if we're coming off of a really big training week or competition week or big week, for some reason across the board, their times are usually down by about 0.2. I don't know why, but it's usually across the board, athlete to athlete. Their 30 meter time is 0.2 slower. So when I see 0.2 slower, athlete after athlete after athlete, I know the training that I planned for that week is not going to work. We need to adjust, like I just said, and this is going to be a deload week, whether I plan for it or not. The athletes are fatigued, we need time. So that has made me correct mistakes much quicker. And it's just been huge for us. Again, I know it's expensive, but I can't not mention it. It's been just huge for us. So we're talking about components, going to speed development. When I'm looking at speed development, like we talked about, I usually divide it into two different categories: acceleration and max velocity. Again, yes, I know if you're doing max velocity, you're also doing acceleration. But especially when I'm teaching athletes, being able to separate it, I think is very important when I'm trying to get a point across. So these days are high effort, low to moderate volume, and lots and lots and lots of recovery. It's all about quality of work here, and we're trying to teach speed development. So one of the things I want to get into when we're going to start talking about sprinting and block starts and drills we do is motor learning. When we're looking at the skills we're doing, we'll just do a quick little background on motor learning control. So we're going to go over 3 basic types of motor skills. And so I think it's important we kind of distinguish which skill we're working on so we kind of know what it is we're working with. So we've got continuous motor skill. It's got no distinct beginning or end. It just repeats over and over. A common example of this is running. Running is a continuous motor skill. One aspect of continuous motor skill is that it's a skill that takes to altering easier than these other two. So we can affect change in real time a little bit quicker because it's a very stable skill. It's cyclical, repeating over and over. We're going to find we're going to affect change a little easier, which is important for us to know as running coaches. The next skill is discrete. It's got a clear beginning and an end. You can think of standing up and throwing a shot put. That's a discrete motor skill. And then the last one is a serial motor skill. So all a serial motor skill is, it's a bunch of discrete motor skills that have to occur in a very specific order. So a common example you will see in this is driving a standard transmission car. There are certain tasks that have to take place in order for you to shift the car into a certain gear and drive. And it has to be done in that order. Now, discrete and serial skills are a little tougher to change, And I think we need to know this going in. Because I do think and the reason I brought up motor learning is I think there's a real disconnect between athletes and motor skills. There seems to be this idea out there that skills are very fleeting and fluid, and they got to constantly practice nonstop or you're going to forget. It's just not the case. Because I think what people mistake is they are going to mistake the parameters of a skill, maybe the timing of it, the speed of it, not the skill itself, but the parameters of it for the skill itself. So I always assure athletes, if you haven't done a block start in 3 weeks, you didn't forget how to do it, your body still knows how to do it, the timing might be a bit off, your speed might not quite be there, but your body knows how to do it. Because you got to think, every time we learned a skill, it had to be constantly practiced or we just forgot it. Life would be a nightmare. Our whole day would just be spent practicing and relearning skills. So you can assure athletes they're not going to forget how to do a block start, they're not going to forget how to run, they're going to be just fine. The timing might take a bit to get back, but they're going to be okay. They're not going to forget how to sprint. No worries. So, mention some drills we do. This is one of my absolute favorites. So when it comes to teaching maximum velocity mechanics, the wicket drill, Vince Anderson is the guru behind it, and it is one of the easiest to teach, easiest to progress, one of the most intuitive drills I've used. And what we're doing here is we're going to be setting up a series of hurdles or wickets at varying spaces. So in this, they'll progressively get slightly longer as the athlete goes. and we will progress. We will start with the spacing in the beginning of the year being very tight, small. And then every about 5 to 6 weeks, I slowly space them out. And we're really just ingraining good max velocity mechanics. So what the athlete's trying to do here is they are trying to drive their foot down. Their foot should land slightly in front of center of mass, and force should be very vertical here. And you can see our athlete is doing an excellent job in this drill. Until it starts to widen a bit, you're going to see at the end here, things do start to lengthen a bit, and we do see it start to fall apart, which is fine because we can see really good mechanics. And then this gives us something we can work on down the road. Um, it's not the easiest drill in the world to set up, but again, it's very intuitive. You'd be surprised how easily the athletes pick it up. It can be used in all kinds of different ways. You can do it standalone. You can pair it with other exercises. You can use 10 hurdles, you can use 20. You can have a long run out, a short run out. There's all kinds of ways you can do. And when the athlete's doing it, if they're literally just trying to step down between the hurdles, they're going to be doing it correctly. It's going to be great. One thing I have seen with this drill is you can see how I have the wickets turned upside down. To me, that's crucial. I don't want to stand them up and have them flailing around. You don't even need hurdles if you don't want to. You could put tape on the ground if you want, or little sticks. It's not so important that it has this big high knee lift. It's about striking in between that's important. So once athletes get on the team, the number one thing I hear about is blocks. Everyone wants to learn blocks. They want to get better at blocks. Blocks, blocks, blocks. Blocks aren't magic. They're not. Just getting in a pair of blocks does not automatically make you faster. But there does seem to be this idea out there. If you want to be fast, you absolutely have to use blocks. Blocks are great. They're a tool to help us redirect force. Again, they're not magic. It's not like something you absolutely need. It's much more important for you to have proper mechanics than using blocks. We had Maine, it was very common. We have football players coming out to the team. They've just gone through a big, football season. They've been accelerating and sprinting a lot, but they haven't been using blocks. So it's very common for us to have them sprint not in blocks. We've had football players going to our conference beat, not using blocks, placing, doing great. I want to make sure your acceleration mechanics are good. I care about that more than I care if you can be in blocks or not. So that's always got to be first. And then when we progress, I always tell the athletes, I never know when exactly you're going to be in blocks. Again, I need to make sure I see proper mechanics first, and then we'll get you in blocks. So for us, we go with standing starts. We go to supported starts, which we will use a plow box or a giant med ball, or basically something they can put their hand on in a 3-point start that's raised up a bit. Because when they're really all the way down to the ground, that's when it gets really hard to get up in the proper start mechanics. So we go standing, supported, 3-point, again, just supported all the way in the ground, 4-point, and then we go to blocks. So if they can't do any of these, we don't go to blocks. When we see the whole group can do each one of these, then we go to blocks. For us, it typically takes, about 5 weeks-ish. And I know in high school, you got to start practicing, you go right into meets almost. So that could be tough. But I would argue trying to teach you, especially your younger athletes, all these mechanics first will benefit them in the long haul. They might not like not being in blocks in a meet, but if the culture's strong and you can convince them this is better for them long term, I think they will buy in and believe it. So when we're looking at blocks, what mistakes do we see? The first one, we all know about this one. We pop right up too quick. We all know about that one. Maybe the one I see least often, if I'm being honest, but we definitely see it. I think a lot of times when I see this one, the cause is fairly simple. So when we're sprinting, wherever our shin is lined up, that's where we're going to be directing force. That's where our body's going to end up. So if we stick our foot out too far in front of us out of blocks, that foot jams in front of us, shin points straight up, we're going to pop straight up. Very simple. So that's where you just have to teach the athlete to, like previous presenters have said, having that big line of power, getting good separation, being able to drive that foot back under center of mass. Probably the most common one I see is trying to stay too low off the start, because athletes do listen, and they're pretty good at adapting, and they've been told over and over again that they're popping up, popping up, popping up. So usually athletes are pretty good at adapting, so then they force themselves to be low. They almost look like curled up cocktail shrimp. They're not applying any force. There's no line of power. They're just shriveled up, and it's not good. Yeah, they're low, but they're falsely low. It's not really low. We want to be low if we're applying power down the track, not if we're just shriveled up and smacking at the ground. So that's where we have to talk to the athletes, let them know it's okay if you pop up a bit in this case. It's going to be way better than you forcing yourself down and having poor ground contact and poor force production. And then we got another one I'm starting to see, and we'll see an example down here. There's too much forward rotation off the start. So I've got two examples. So we'll see one of our athletes showing this, and then after we've worked on it a bit, we'll see what kind of progress we get. So we've got starting out, and what we'll see is that foot popping. If we look at our left heel, if we talk about line of power, we've got an okay line, but not great, and the heel is going to pop up. You can see her right leg is not driving all the way up because her upper body is forced way too far down. So what's happening is we're seeing a block-in action from the front leg. We see the left heel driving up, and she is just almost spilling out of the blocks. So all we're seeing here is we're almost in survival mode. We're seeing poor ground contact, and it isn't until maybe here or here that we're getting good sprint mechanics. From the gun going off until almost here, we're just wasting our time because we've got not coming up quite tall enough, right leg blocking, left heel coming up, and we're just falling into the start. Not good. So we're not going to be perfect, but we can see after we worked a little bit, we're getting a little better. Coming up maybe a tiny bit more. I'm trying to bring that right knee up a little more. Try and keep that left heel down a little more. And we do see a much better ground contact than kind of the stabbing into the ground. We do see it coming back better. Again, not perfect, but that's not what we're looking for. I think it's important when we're talking to our athletes, even if it's just a little bit of an improvement, that's great. That's what we want, little improvements, little improvements. And if we can show them small improvements, that's going to, again, massive into building that environment, building that culture. We don't need huge improvements, we just need little ones. And when it comes to our speed work, creative recovery. This is, again, I keep talking recovery, it's so important. We're doing a speed session, most of our time is going to be spent recovering. It's not going to be spent actually sprinting, we're going to be recovering most of the time. Because when we're doing these short sprints in practice, our ATP CP energy system is primarily going to be at work. So we know that the energy system has about a 1 to 10 work to rest ratio. So every 1 second of work we do, we need 10 seconds of recovery. I go way overboard with this. I double or triple it with my kids. Everyone's a little different. I don't want to be overtraining. I want to prioritize recovery, so I double or triple it. And then also, when we're recovering, we don't want to waste time and we don't want to create distractions. Again, how we handle our team, the culture within it is so critical, so important. So what I started doing, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, So I started adding accessory work to our sprint days. So what that means is, let's say you do a 30-meter sprint, they might then do a mobility exercise or a stability exercise in between. Something very low intensity, so getting proper recovery, but working mobility, working on stability. We're getting better, and it's organizing everything. Because for one, if you tell them, okay, I want 2 minutes, 3 minutes recovery, even if you aren't right on top of it with your review time to recovery, it still might, you might get caught talking to someone. It might not be exactly what you want. And also, what are kids going to do when they're just recovering for 3 minutes? They're going to chat, they're going to laugh, which is good. Around, it's a good thing, but you don't want too much. You want things to get out of hand. What you never want to see is, right, an athlete, after their recovery period, walking to a start line for that 30 and talking about Netflix or Hulu or anything else. And then while they're talking, oh, I didn't know that was on Netflix, that it was on Amazon, and then they turn and sprint. They're not prepared for it. They're thinking about something else. So if we can instead keep their mind in training, keep them focused on the task at hand, I think the quality of work is going to go up. So doing this creative recovery, so putting in accessories to our sprint days has been really, really big for us. Our quality of work has gone up. We've gotten the appropriate recovery. It's been really, really big for us. And another training tool I've used is density. I think volume and intensity is something we're aware of, but we don't really look at density. All density is the amount of different exercises we're using in a given session. What I've found is it's a great way for me to add a training stimulus without touching volume or intensity. So if I want to add another stimulus, but I don't want to touch how much you're doing or how the effort of it, I can add different exercises. And if we're in a big block of training, I can have a lot of different exercises and then start pulling them out as we get into our championship season. So it's another great tool in our quiver to use. And it's also going to be used as a great teaching tool. If we want to teach start mechanics, I can take 2 to 3 or 4 drills, put them in a proper sequence. Density is higher, but they're really learning the proper technique, what we're trying to go about. So density is a good tool for stimulus, and it's also really good for teaching. Really important for us. I'm not going to get too into tempo. This seems to be one of the most contentious parts of training. As I know, there's a lot of training methodology out there that are basically doing no sub-max work. Again, whatever works for you is great. If that works, I'm all for it. I do still use sub-max work. Volume's not crazy. We're typically in the 1600 range. Again, intent is key. The how is always over the what. And when we're doing these sub-max work, we're always going to meet as a group, what we're trying to accomplish. Are we trying to work on race patterning? Are we working on technique? What is it we're trying to accomplish? And again, most of our training is in that 14 to 1600 range. It's nothing crazy. Our recovery can vary anywhere from a minute and a half, to who knows how long, depending on what we're trying to accomplish. I don't know if we're running out of time, but I wanted to add this in because I saw this the other day on Twitter, and I wanted to brush on it briefly because when it comes to our tempo work or our training, I think that's brought us pretty good insight. So I saw a football coach post this on Twitter and get a lot of backlash. So this was a training they had for their athletes after they got back from break. So this was something that on their own the kids were to be building towards, and then once they're out to train together, it was going to be something they would do as a team. And this coach got crushed on Twitter for the workout not being beneficial. Now, to start with, is this something I would ever prescribe to my athletes? No. Volume's too high. I wouldn't. It's not that I see it as really bad or damaging. I just feel like I would be able to get much higher quality of work, more purposeful work elsewhere. But we always have to listen to people, and there's lots of different ways to train. And what I noticed was whenever this particular coach was defending his point, he constantly went back to the how and the why. Kept talking about why they were doing it is because he wanted to give them something they could do with limited equipment that they could work towards as kind of a team goal and something they could eventually do kind of together. And then when he talked about the how, he would talk about how, he wanted them to finish, but they didn't have to do every single rep or finish within every single thing. The kids were instructed to just do as much as they could. And then when I noticed people critiquing him, even though from a physiological standpoint or from a training standpoint, I agreed with them, they kept going back to the what. The what they're doing, what they were doing. I never saw anyone talk about the why or the how. It's always about the what. So to me, this is an example of the what being not great, but he had a decent how, he had a good why. So I would say instead of taking something like this and just trashing it, I think this would be his how and his why are great. I think it'd be very easy to work with this coach and create a really good what. I don't think it'd be that difficult. If you take instead of all this prolonged running and pull-ups and push-ups, if you took it to more of a stability standpoint, more of a speed standpoint, made sure it was something with limited equipment, people could do it on their own, you could get a great workout out of it with the same how, the same why. So I just thought this was a good example of let's not get too bogged down in what, because I don't think this workout really hurt the kids. It may not have made them better football players, but it seemed like this coach's goal was to bring them together as a team, and it could very well have accomplished that. So to me, that why and how could have been okay. And then when we're talking another training component is specific speed. This is going to be our speed endurance, our special endurance. Like I said, it's putting all the pieces together. Basically, it's taking the acceleration, the max velocity, tempo, and it's putting it all together. This is going to be, you might see, a 250, 150, 100 workout. You could see 3x 150. Like there's any number of ways you can do this. But it should have very low volume, tons and tons of recovery, and the intensity has to be very high. Intent has to be high, intensity has to be high. It's something we don't get into right away in our training. And it's something we're doing, like you saw in my training plan I showed earlier. About a month and a half out from our big meets, we were doing a good amount of this. And it's a great way to see where the athletes are at. When I'm doing it, I typically do off distances. So for example, if our athlete's competing in the 400 to 200 or the 100, we're not going to do specific or special speed work with those distances. We'll do 250s or 150s or 80s or 350s or something different, because you want to separate that training and competition. I want them to have their practice numbers and like a 250, 150 we're really proud of, and their 100, 200, 400 numbers they're really proud of. I don't want them to get a 200 time in practice slower than what to run in the meet and get bummed out. So I want to, make it unique to practice. So we talked about keep track of recovery. I firmly believe this is maybe the most important days we do. Recovery days, from my experience, it creates high team morale. It's a relaxed feel to that day. Kids know it's recovery day. They're going to have a lot of fun. They're going to talk amongst themselves. For us, we bring the whole group in together. So all 40-something kids are doing it together. It's a relaxed day. They're focused, but it's relaxed. We can work on any tight or sore areas we have. We can work on technique. And I also do a lot of sprint drills. So I saw this again on Twitter the other day, where there was a study that looked, that showed there's no direct correlation between sprint drills and speed development. Nope, didn't think there was. So I guess the question is, why do I do sprint development drills like A skips, B skips, fast legs? What I've found is, again, we can't go all out every single day. So it's good to put in a warm-up. It's good to put in recovery days. And what I've found is, although it isn't a direct transfer, it's a really good reference point. Because it's not done at super high intensity, the athlete can really feel the mechanics we're trying to teach them. And if, let's say on Wednesday, we do sprint drills, on Thursday, we do the max velocity, I can refer back to a sprint drill we did and talk about, how you should feel in this max velocity day compared to that. So it gives the athlete a really good reference point. Like, remember when you're B-skip, you're striking with your leg down under your center of mass and think, oh yeah, we were working on that. With your posture tall, like, oh yeah. It'll help them give that reference point when they're actually sprinting. And like we talked about, when they're actually in their run, it's continuous motor skill. So we know we can more effectively create change in that setting. So again, the sprint drill is not a, fix all. You're not going to do a sprint drill and automatically get faster. But I think it's a nice reference point for the athletes to work off of. So that is, my kind of attempt at showing how we build the program. My big things are having the how over the what, like we talked about. Again, how we do something is always going to be much, much more important than what we do. There always has to be a why. Whenever we're doing something, know why you're doing it. If you don't know why you're doing something, take it out of your program. I always encourage my athletes to ask me why we're doing something or how we're doing something. I want athletes having that dialogue between me. I don't run teams as a dictatorship. We're all in this together. Every athlete on my team has a voice. Their input is all respected. And I love when athletes ask me why we're doing something, because I always have an answer. We want to make sure we have this kind of big picture plan. It's going to help us stay organized. Again, it has to be thought out. We got to make sure, again, this is where the how comes in. We got to make sure that our training can be executed at a high level. Just because we saw some cool drill online or on Instagram, I don't understand it. I'm not putting it in my program. We want to make sure as coaches, we can coach whatever drill or training session, we can coach it appropriately so we're getting a high level of work. And the last thing, we want to make sure we can create an environment. We want to make sure we're empowering athletes. So with that, we want to make sure they're into the program. It's an environment that they can be successful in. And again, they want to be in track. I love this sport. I've been involved with it for 20 something years. I love it to death. I want to pass it on to athletes. I want a place they can excel, they can enjoy, they want to keep coming back day after day. And that is all I have today. If people have questions, let me know.
I know there was a question in the chat about the wickets.
Yes.
How when you're starting the season at the beginning of your season, how
Yep.
far away do you typically start them at, Chris?
So for our females, again, I apologize ahead of time. I am not very good at feet and inches, but our women typically start at about 1.57 meters, and our men typically start, right around, I believe, 1.65, 1.7 meters.
Okay.
If that makes sense. I apologize. I'm not good with feet and inches.
Right. You got it in the meters. So you got your mind in meters.
Yeah. And then we progress. When we're progressing, we're changing about 3 centimeters at a time, and it's very slow. Like I said, every 5 to 6 weeks is when I progress, or like when I see they need to progress. And over the course of a year, so for women that start at 1.57, I think I've gotten them all the way up to 1.7, 1.75 meters. And I've gotten the guys up to, I want to say 1.9-ish meters, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yep.
It's going to be different every year, every group. It's all going to depend on how they're doing it.
6 feet. So that actually leads really well into my question. So when we can use the wickets for example.
Yep.
So I know what the high school season looks like, which is not we can't train for a year. We're not even allowed to
Yes.
for a
Yes.
year. If we wanted to, we couldn't. What would like for the wicket drill? Would you suggest just keeping them kind of like say for the women? You said 1.56, I believe. So
Yep.
would you just suggest like kind of keeping them there because it is that high school level, doing that drill well, maybe slightly increasing after like 4 weeks, but not going too
Mhm.
crazy with it? Is that what you would? Do you think? Would you suggest that?
So I'll give you my suggestion. I might be wrong because I have not coached at high school level, so I don't know how. I've seen a lot of practices, but I'm not in there. I don't know how crazy they get. But what I would do is probably similar to what I did when I was at the Division III level, which is because when I was at that level, I had a lot of developmental athletes. So if I tried to keep everyone on the same path, it would never work. So what I would do is I would have more of a progressive or higher level spacing. I would have a more developmental spacing. So one of them might stay very small and low and slowly increase. The other one would increase at more a standard rate.
Okay.
And depending on, again, what athlete they would use each one. So ideally, I think I would have a couple set up for different levels.
Okay, right. So you would like you might have a I don't want to use like you might have an A, B, and a C.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
and like A, say would be the beginner level, and then intermediate, and then you'd have the highest level that would be pushing
Yep.
kind of at the growth rates that you were pushing.
Yes. And then, because what you're going to find is you're probably, if we're doing our jobs right, you're probably not going to be able to keep them the exact same space all year. The athletes are going to get faster.
Right.
Stride rate is going to, stride length is going to increase. So you're going to have to move them over. They're going to be kicking them all over the track. And especially for us, because we start doing them in trainers, by the end of the year, we're doing them almost exclusively in spikes.
Oh, okay. At the high school, at a younger level, more developmental level, would you suggest sticking with trainers or
Probably, yeah. Yeah,
what?
whatever's going to be safe. Yeah, definitely.
Um,
I don't think there's anything wrong with doing it in trainers, nothing at all.
right.
Because I know there's an argument that it always has to be done at super high velocity, but I think, you can very easily get 95% in your trainers. I think that's more than possible. So yeah, I think it's perfectly fine if you're gonna do them in trainers.
Heather, yeah, go for it, Heather. Go unmute. Ask your question.
Hi, thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear.
Thank you, Chris, for coming and doing this for us.
Of course.
I have a question about the wickets again.
Yeah.
I've tried to set them up numerous times. Of course, as Jamie said, it's really hard when you have so many different kids on the team. I have about 40 to 60 sprinters, depending on what season I have.
Yep.
And when I'm going to space them out, I try to increase, like, they're close together and they get further away.
Yep.
I don't seem to have a good, like, model right at the beginning. Like the first one is like 4 feet, and then the next one is 4.5 feet. I know you don't like feet, but
Yep.
what is your measurements like for like just a general like increasing?
So I'm lucky I have one of Vince Anderson's really fancy charts that's incredible. And that's what I use. But what I think you'll find is they're not going to progress at a rate you think they might. Like, for example, it's not like, I wouldn't necessarily go, 4 feet, 4.5, 5, 5.5. We're talking, you put down 1, 2, and then the third increases like a couple inches, and a couple inches. Like, we're talking very, very gradual increases until you get to your desired length, and then it'll be constant around there.
How many wickets would you say till they get up to the desired length of like 1.5? So you probably have like 4 or 5 wickets for the acceleration area, and then they should be up and tall by like the 5th one?
About that. So what we do is we set up a roughly 10-meter or so acceleration zone. And then, yes, you are still in somewhat acceleration by the first few. And then I
Oh,
would say by probably wickets 6 to 7, maybe, you're kind of, yeah, like by what you just said, you're up to speed. It's full go. And then now what you could see in when I showed the example is in that one, I actually, by the end, because we were in a phase where we're, kind of seeing where we were at, they were getting a little longer than what I desired at the end. I want to see, what they could do. So that
okay.
one got longer and longer and longer. And that's why you saw by the end, slight decreases in mechanics. And that's something I would note. And then that tells you right away, if those last couple were too far. And that'll kind of show you where you need to be.
Okay, that sounds good. With the wickets, another question, sorry.
Yeah.
You're
Okay.
looking on staying tall, having the hips kind of forward, the foot slightly landing in front of you. Would you
Right.
ever use the wickets to see if you could not overstride? I don't want to use you don't want to overstride, but I have a girl that has a very bad, like she has a really short stride. She has no back whatsoever. She's not pushing off the ground right.
Yep.
And I'm
Yep.
trying to increase it. And I don't know if wickets would help.
I think it absolutely would help.
Okay.
Again, so it sounds like she might have to be in that developmental and then slowly increase. But I can tell you, by being very disciplined about it, starting at a spacing they can handle. I typically start it way under what they want. They usually don't like my early spacing. And then, by the end, if I go by the feet, we've increased the spacing by, a massive amount. If it's done incrementally and you're showing proper technique, and again, nothing we do in training can be isolated. We have to look at every other part of their training. If it's all going well, then yes, they should be able to safely increase that spacing. Now, you've got to look at everything, right? There could be some underlying structural problems with the athlete. There could be some severe mobility issues. There could be severe strength issues. So we got to attack it, wholesale. And then one other thing I should note. So obviously I mentioned, the foot should land slightly in front of the hips because we do have to generate force. But that's not what I tell my athletes. I tell them to put their foot right under their hips. That's what we strive for. Because if you tell them to do that, most of the time they're going to land just in front, just where you want. I hope that helped. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it did. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Chris, when we're thinking about, I see that you use tempo, and I've been kind of dancing with that idea. And then you said you use speed endurance later in the year.
I wouldn't say later. I would say as a real, like I talked about my themes.
Yeah.
So it would be a real, big part of the theme later in the year. We're starting some kind of speed endurance fairly early in our training year. It's just more, again, I'm teaching them about it. We're doing very small doses. I'm introducing them to it, and we're getting back into it. But speed endurance is going to be present almost the whole year. It's just that point in the year that I mentioned is when it's the theme. It's what I'm really looking towards.
Oh, okay. So it would be a mesocycle later in the year, but you're still going to do a speed endurance day in the microcycles early in the year.
Yeah, because it's like anything else. If I deem speed endurance to be really important, and we're going to take this whole training cycle to really put it in there, I'm not going to introduce it. They're not going to know what to do. They're not going to be familiar with it.
Right.
It's not going to go well. And there's a lot of benefits of speed endurance that I could have been getting in earlier phases. So yeah, I'm always including it to some extent.
Cool.
Like in their summer program right now, they got a pretty good speed endurance workout this week. So yeah, it's always present.
It's always in there, right? It's always part of the plan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. That answers my question. Yeah. Heather, do you have anything else?
No, I don't think so. Thank you again so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm I want to thank everyone for inviting me. It was, yeah, I'm glad I could do it. I
Yeah.
mean, like I was worried about, I'm just worried about talking too long and yammering too long. I can literally talk about sprinting and training all day. I love it. So yeah, that's the only thing. I just didn't want to carry on too long and bore everybody. That was my main concern, is I
No,
can talk about this stuff.
I don't. I'll be honest. I wish I scheduled you earlier in the year. I think as I'm reflecting on all of the things that we've seen and all of the different topics that have been presented,
And
um,
they were great, by the way. Great. As I mean, I watched them. They're great.
looking at some of the suggestions and the talking points and the best practices with the lens that you presented today of kind of a program lens. It really ties it together. Maybe this is the perfect time to have done it, or maybe at the beginning I'd have to look at a different plan. But this, I think, really puts a bow or a focus on what we should be doing with the new learning that we've done, like building this plan,
Mhm.
the cycles, and
Yeah.
really focusing. I might actually steal your mantra and uh,
Mhm.
and slap it on a shirt for the team
Okay.
next year. I really like that.
It
Uh,
makes everything so much easier, because everyone's always worried about the what the drill is, what the this is.
right,
Pick something you're comfortable with, that's safe and effective, and do it really, really, really well.
right,
Like, you don't have to overcomplicate sprinting. Sprinting is amazing. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated. You just want to make sure it's done well.
right,
You can go out there and have an athlete do 5, 10 meter sprints. And if that quality is there, the effort's there, and you're coaching them well, I guarantee you they're going to get better. Guarantee you.
right. Excellent. Well, I want to end this by saying thank you, Chris. It was an awesome presentation. Again, like I just said, I think maybe the best one to end on, or the one we should have started with. It is. Yeah, we got a big thank you from Heather there. I really appreciate your time and your effort with this. It was a great presentation, and I wish you all the luck in all your future seasons.
Thank you. Thank you. You as well.
All right, I'm gonna